1. This story happened nearly 1 year ago. Backstory. In computing class we had, like in any other class too, some competent, some incompetent, and some lazy students. The main task was programming with Java. Since I loved coding, I already worked a lot with Java before we used it in school. This wasn't a secret, so many came to ask me instead of our teacher for help. The teacher was already busy helping others, and kind as I am, I helped every time as good as I can. But after some time, something started. The lazy guys walked through the room and looked on the other's code and copied it. With some time and minimal effort, they made their code working and got through the years. Me, a C# developer, ignored most of Java's conventions. I wrote method names with capital letters, handled get and set methods as C# like as I could, so none of mine had a get or set in his name, and so on. This saved my code from being pirated. And now we had our last project. Over more than 2 months we worked on this, and again the code piracy started. But since it was a more complex project than anything we had done before, it was hard to copy something completely. It was simply too large to explain similarities. The malicious compliance. Like every time, I had no exact idea. I started around 10 projects, and finished 2 large and 1 simple. Then, in the last week, one of the laziest came to me and asked if I could make him a project. Since I had one completed that I wasn't proud enough to present, I gave it to him. He thanked me and took it. He played a bit with it to show how it works, and that was it. He doesn't even take a single look in the source code. This meant I used multiple classes, something many don't understand and didn't use. I used packages to sort my classes, something only our teacher also did. I fully documented my code and used my special documentation comments we never spoke about in class. I used my typical style no one else used, since Java shouldn't look like this. Still, it worked fine. I had signed them with my name. On top, I placed all my projects in our shared folder, like everyone else, and because of this, my copy was there first. He was one of the last who presented, and like with every other project, our teacher asked him to show us some code and explain parts he was really proud of. So he opened a file, and the first thing was the information about the author, me, so he told that he used this to build his project on. Our teacher allowed us to take parts from elsewhere, as long as we marked them as others' work. And opened another file, and the first thing was the information about the author. But since this was already where he thought it would be, he scrolled down as fast as he could so no one could see the author. Now everyone could see my special style of coding. He ignored this and made some vague comments which explained nothing. Then he closed the file but kept the overview open. In the overview you can clearly see the name of the project. Like everywhere else, I also made the package names more C#-like. It was like bdev.app.projectname. There were 2 more problems. First, I sent all my projects with bdev, capital B, capital D, small e, small v. Something obviously no one else would do. Second, in Java, all package names are with lowercase. We never learned with uppercase. Our teacher smiled all the time. He already looked into our project, so he could ask if he didn't understand what we did. Unlikely, or he isn't sure which grade we deserve, so we could show additional knowledge or not. The first thing he asked is, what does @author bdev mean? I don't know what he got in all. I'm sure it wasn't great. I didn't get in any trouble, no one even knew I gave it to him. Like I said, it was already in our shared folder, so anyone can access it. 2. This all started with my dad being offered a job, and a condition that the boss set me up with one as well. I was fresh out of school and was looking around for jobs, when my dad calls me and asks me to come for an interview for a delivery job. I quickly scatter off to the shower and make it there within 30 minutes. The boss, John, seemed to be nice and was supportive of me going to take a month of leave to study full-time for my truck license. YKB in Sweden and EU. After the interview and signing the contract, I went to the restroom and overheard John chewing out a colleague of mine for something that was not his fault. I was hoping it was just a stressful day, but boy was I wrong. I came back the next day for work. I meet up with my colleague who was temporarily driving the route I was going to have. He was there to train me and give me instructions, etc. He tells me about the workplace and tells me that everyone hates John. Still, I wanted to make up my own mind in the matter, and decided to mostly ignore the small talk. In all of the trucks, there are supposed to be papers showing all of the stops and rules for deliveries. There were none in this particular vehicle. We ask John if we can have one, and he begins screaming at my coworker about how he's responsible for it, even though he only has this route for a week, temporarily. After this, I promptly tell my boss the exact date of the course I told him about, seeing as I only told him November through December, the first time. He tells me, "That's a long time, but you can always postpone it, so it's fine." He knew the length of the course before getting my contract, and the course cost $3,600, and not refundable. I tell him this and he explodes. I decide to waddle out of there, but now he has this massive grudge against me. My father gets a new contract with his current company with a much bigger payout, and decides to stick with it. This makes my boss even angrier. At me. My boss then tries to mess with my hours and pay, holding back several $100s, which I got after talking to the company department. After this, I realize I don't want to work here. He tells me that he can offer a truck job after I get my license, and I answer, "Yeah, that's good." Day after day, he chews me out for things not in my control, and begins to do everything legally in his power to make my shift worse for me, so I do the same toward him. As a delivery driver, I have to be nice to customers, etc., etc. One of the things I did for the customers is holding out on my break to get there in time. I had to deliver everything by 7 a.m., and I start my shift at 1 a.m. Legally, I have to take a 30-minute break after 6 hours of work. The route was terribly planned, and very often I'd just have minutes left, or even worse. I'd be at the last stop by exactly 7. One particular day I was late because we had lots of goods to deliver. I had 3 stops when the clock strikes 7, so I take my break. Customers start calling, but I don't pick up because I don't have to do so on my break. My boss calls me by the end of my break and complains about my deliveries not being on time. I explain that I was on break, and he tells me I can always postpone it. I tell him no, I cannot do that, because the law requires me to take a break at 7 a.m., and he gets furious. The next day, a system-wide message gets sent saying, "We have to deliver by 7 a.m. because complaints have been coming in. We are about to lose a massive customer." This customer, which we deliver goods for to their customers, was roughly half of the company income. The following 2 days was the same story, lots to do, and I take my break. My boss leaves 11 voicemails on my break, and I call him back when I'm back on the clock. He begins ranting on and on about how terrible I am and such. He tells me I can leave the keys when I get back, and never come back to the job. After my leave, a few co-workers call me and tell me they resigned. The company now lacks half the drivers and can't manage the workload by themselves. The company loses their biggest client and promptly fires most staff before selling half the company to someone else. Last I checked, they're not doing too good, because John is still there and nobody wants to work there. Their reputation is spread. I've heard from everyone partaking in the same course as me that the company is a hellhole, and going downhill. 3. So I'm staying at this nice hotel, and I get free breakfast with my room. I go downstairs and sit down for breakfast. It's a nice buffet. There's an egg station where you can fill out a card and they make the egg you order. Anyways, from behind me I hear this shrill voice, none other but a Karen. Now I'm in Asia, so there is a Karen who are even worse. Since they pay, and pay goes to the waiters, they think they own said waiters. Anyway, she keeps yelling waiter, but the place was understaffed at the moment. The egg guy, 2 waiters, and the check-in lady. There were maybe 15 people eating breakfast at the time. "Be with you in a moment." Fine. A few minutes later, the waitress stops by Karen's table. "I never asked for ham in my omelet." "Okay, I'll check your slip." Comes back in a moment. "Ma'am, you did check the box for ham. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. We'll make you another one as soon as possible." "No, I want it now." "Ma'am, we have other customers to attend to." "I don't care. You need to satisfy everyone here, and I'm not satisfied. Make me another egg, now. No ham." The egg guy must have heard, because he did not look pleased. The waitress walked over and told him Karen's order, and I could see a big grin show across his face. He started making the new omelet, and seeing this, Karen seemed happy, but kept an eye on the process from her seat. A guy says from across the room, "You wanted extra ham, right?"
"No, no ham at all."
"Sorry, can't hear you." As he said this, he locked eyes with her and he poured the entire bowl of ham into the egg, and Karen let out a screech, like she just saw Satan suck her child's toes. After the banshee screech, she of course started yelling about how she demanded to see the hotel manager, as any Karen would. It took them about 20 minutes to call them over, and by the time he was there were more staff, and I was almost finished eating. He of course asked what was going on and why she was screeching like a demon, and they finally managed to calm her down. After going into the kitchen for a quick chat with the omelet guy and the waitress, he came back out, apologized to Karen for the trouble, and the bitch got away with a free breakfast for her trouble. Now you may think she got off easy, and even a free breakfast, but the way my hotel works is, if they feel really sorry, they'll actually compensate you with maybe another night at the hotel, free drinks, room service keys. But free breakfast is the least they ever give out, so it's easy to get. So really, she just got a whining present, and in all honesty, it cost the hotel nothing. The bitch is probably going to show up tomorrow at breakfast and have something similar happen. We'll see. I'll head down tomorrow just to watch it unravel. 4. So today I was at the hospital for a medical checkup, and I was running about half an hour late because my taxi was stuck in traffic. Anyways, I walk onto the elevator at the 15th floor, and behind me I hear, "Ugh, such a lack of manners." There's 3 people on the elevator. Me, Boomer, and a sweet old lady. I look around confused and ask, "Wait, me?" And Boomer responds, "Of course you. You walked in front of a lady." And I started explaining I was late for an appointment and in a big hurry, and his response was tough. And he started diving into how my parents must be terrible and brought me up even worse because I had no basic manners. The whole time, the sweet old lady was trying to tell him it was okay and I'd done nothing wrong. Only walked about 5 feet in front of her. Eventually, she got off and Boomer started muttering to himself something about uncultured prick. Now he was getting off on floor 29. I did the reasonable thing when getting off and ran my hand across the panel, lighting up every single floor. 5. Bit of significant background, but necessary, I think. My previous job, I was a cashier working at a casino in my hometown. It was an international organization that had several casinos in 2 countries. I quite enjoyed my job and became quite proficient in the workings of the casino, as I'm one of those people who like knowing how different things work and fit together for the whole picture. My boss was hard, but fair. More importantly was he provided an environment where we could grow and professionally develop if you had the incentive. Needless to say, I participated a lot. High roller transactions, government reporting and compliance, in addition to being part of a team that implemented new management software and new equipment for the casino. I was a relief shift manager in addition to my regular duties, and was briefly promoted to shift manager before I decided to decline the promotion during the probation period, knowing full well I may have hurt further progression. Whilst my boss was good, upper management was garbage, and had been for years, fostering an environment where lower management were fighting among themselves. They wanted to fire my boss but couldn't, so they instead put huge pressure on him to leave. He didn't leave. Then they hired 2 shift managers and gave them free rein to implement changes, and got the senior cashiers who did relief work, myself included, to train them up. Suffice to say, they resented this, but did not ask themselves why not one of us wanted to apply for the promotion. With free rein to implement changes and reporting directly to my boss's boss, who wanted him gone, my boss was effectively sidelined. The new manager started trying to change things without understanding what they were doing or what effect it would have on multiple departments, which pissed off a lot of my co-workers who eventually stopped trying to help and train them because they couldn't accept that we knew more about their job than they did. One day, one of them approached me because a spreadsheet wasn't working properly, and being the person who updated the sheet, I immediately saw that someone had been messing around with the sheet, changing cell sizing, layouts, which resulted in several formula breaking. I said I was reverting it back because someone had been messing with it, to which I was told it was the other shift manager, and if I didn't like the change, I should have applied for the position. Then and there I decided I had enough. Told her I was reverting it because almost all of our spreadsheets were linked to other files in finance, and that they could have fucked up a lot of stuff because of change. If you're going to change something, fine, but at least know what you're doing first. I left her to stew on that in silence. I was the last person who was helping them at that point, and that had just stopped. A couple of months later, both resigned because they couldn't cope with the work, nor cope with the fact that every single employee in our department no longer liked them. I later found out that in their exit interviews, both of them complained very loudly against most of the senior cashiers who were supposed to be training them, myself included. Fast forward a month. I was entering the next few weeks' schedule into our roster system during a relief shift. As I do with some mundane tasks, I might poke around to see what functions the software has that can help me do my task more efficiently. I was looking into a template option and trying to copy a previous month when I discovered staff costs on the side, effectively wages. Since I work with numbers, being a cashier, it was really easy to see that one of the previous managers was paid at entry manager rate. However, the other was paid an absurdly high figure. I reported the fact that I accidentally stumbled across staff cost information to the other shift manager, who had been there for years. She asked me to show her, so I did, and I heard nothing further of it. Being good with numbers, she also noticed the two previous shift managers' salary, especially the one being paid a large amount. A couple months later, a 2IC for the department was transferred from another casino within the company, and some months after that, my boss negotiated a nice severance package. Immediately, there were certain restrictive changes implemented which hurt morale further. Later, one of my colleagues accepted a promotion to shift manager, and asked me if his salary offer was fair, since he had no reference point to go by, as part of management's control was to keep people in the dark and competing against each other. I told him what my offer had been, and spoke a bit on how they decided on their offers based on my own experience, adding that at the end I thought it was reasonable. The next day I mentioned the conversation to the older shift manager, who freaked out a little, thinking that I had discussed her salary with my colleague, but also asked if I still had access to the wage info, to which I replied that it was probably still there. A day after that, I was notified that I was being called into HR for a meeting due to a breach of confidentiality issue. As this fell in my day off, as I left my shift, I emailed that I was not able to attend the meeting and detailed the conversation I had with my colleague. A few hours later, they sent me an email stating I was being stood down immediately with pay and would notify me of the next meeting. At this point, I started getting distressed as I realized that now my previous boss was gone, they were systematically looking for an excuse to get rid of specific people across all departments. Everyone in my department was systematically interviewed, and they tried to dig up any dirt they could find on me. They had nothing and kept looking and looking. A week turned into two turned into three. At the end of the third week, I was asked to come in for a meeting on the Monday, beginning of the fourth week. I came in with a friend as a support person and sat down with my boss and the HR rep. Their entire focus was on the conversation 10 months prior, when I raised the issue of me discovering wage information with my supervisor. This conversation wasn't recorded, and all they had was my written statement about the conversations I had and what the older shift supervisor had said. They decided that was sufficient to issue me with a first and final warning, but also stand me down from relief work and revoke access to the scheduler software. I calmly told them fine. I disagree with their decision, as it was unreasonable being based off of a 10-month-old conversation with no formal record, and that I was looking for another job. They asked what kind of job I was looking for, to which I responded that it was none of their business. They had the nerve to expect me to work that day. I simply told them that after 3 weeks of uncertainty I was stressed and not able to return for another week, and would bring them a medical certificate. I took the outcome to my union, who attempted to negotiate a better outcome, but nothing changed. When I returned to work, I discovered that they had revoked much more than what was agreed on. I no longer was on certain email distribution lists, which meant I was in the dark for the majority of things going on. I was somehow expected to do certain tasks, but without the necessary access. I decided right there and then that I was doing the bare minimum, and if I didn't have the required access, I would not do any related tasks. They opted to go with the petty route. I laid down my groundwork. I became uncooperative with instructions sent via email because I didn't actually receive the email, not on the mailing list. They issued me with a written warning for not following instructions, so I started using up my sick leave for stress. I had a lot saved up from 6 years, before handing in my 4 weeks' notice. They opted to pay me out instead of having me return, probably thinking that I would try to do something malicious if I returned. Joke's on them. Most staff in my department had a personal folder in the department's network drive, where they kept stuff like training notes, resumes, etc., which was publicly accessible, but also a private network drive linked to your login. Most didn't use the private drive, as we couldn't access it on the main network that the user terminals were on. But the department's network drive was. After the crap they put me through previously, I had cleared out my 6 years' worth of notes and personal documentation for our public access folders, and moved them into my personal employee drive on the network, which is where they should have been kept in the first place. This included configuration settings and options for various machines and software that we used. No one else, not even IT, had as comprehensive documentation as mine, or spent the time I did coherently learning how the various systems worked together in detail. Once IT processed my employee withdrawal, that stuff was gone. I heard down the grapevine a few months later they were frantically trying to find my notes to fix a serious issue. Not to mention smaller time-consuming issues that occur on occasion. Haven't looked back since. Just to clarify, the only documents I moved were my own personal notes and references. Training materials were not touched. Same with vendor reference documentation. If other people don't want to learn the nuances of their systems and how they interact, then that is on them. I moved my notes as an afterthought, as I didn't want people going through my stuff. And I realize this is only one side of the story, and you may disagree with my actions, which is fair. Upper management were attempting to create as meek a workforce as they possibly could, as they were wanting to look good to investors. Dozens of staff across multiple departments were pressured to resign, or literally sidelined by new hires. The casino was sold around 8 months after I left. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, number 37. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. What day does this go up? I literally have no idea what day this goes up. I'm just recording a bunch of stories and kind of throwing them against the wall. Okay, not quite that indelicate. I'm recording a bunch of stories and making them into nice videos as I usually do, but as to when they go up, that's kind of random. Let's say this will be Thursday. Okay, so we're January 2nd by the time this goes up. Well, I hope you're all having a very nice new year, and I hope you had a safe but fun time celebrating, and that your hangovers weren't too awful. Okay, with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.